The Infragistics Net Advantage Silverlight line of business control set comes with a really great set of editor controls, such as a mask editor, which allows you to set a mask, which essentially is a string that represents various types of data entry values and characters or numerics to be entered. We also have a numeric editor, which allows you to essentially accept numbers only. And in this particular sample, we see various examples of input masks. An input mask essentially is a string that contains literals that will show up directly in the editor, such as these open and closed parentheses, which pretty much formulate a US phone number. The other thing is that the pound signs represents required new numbers, so when I click on this, I can't just type text. So I try to type text and it won't let me. I must type in numerics only. And notice that the other thing that is supported within these controls is validation. So here's an example of a US Social Security number where I could enter values, and once the mask requirements are set, there's no more validation exception. Here's some more examples of various masks that you can input, such as hexadecimal and 2 or 3 version hexadecimal. And another thing that you can do to the controls is enable the always in edit mode property on the control, where it's always in edit mode whether or not the control is focused or not. That causes the prompt characters to be shown, because whenever you go into edit mode, that's when the prompt characters, which essentially are these little underscores, show up to kind of prompt the end user into entering data. They don't show up when focus is lost. However, when it's always in edit mode, you will always see the prompt characters. Another exploration of the details of validation. So let's consider this example where we have some numerics in here. When I move off, we get a validation error. So let's take a look at how this one looks. So make sure the validation mode is set to always, so that way it will try to validate whenever you move off of the control. If we take a look at the code behind, what essentially we're doing is we have bound the controls to an object, and the object happens to have name property on it. And the validates on exceptions property is set to true, as well as notify on validation error. That's set to true as well. So now if we examine the actual data model, so it's very simple. It's a very simple class, and it has this one property name that we're going to look at now. Is that on the setter, if we try to pretty much set a name or string property whose length is less than 3, we're going to throw an exception whose actual string of an error message is placed in a resource file somewhere for localization purposes, will be thrown in the exception message. So that's what's going on here. So essentially when we try to add something that's like less than 3 characters, in this case 3 characters are fine, we have to do 2 characters. The exception is thrown within the actual object itself, within the property setter, and it's bubbled up once we enable those 2 properties on the editor. So what this translates to is, if you set up your data model to have properties that throw exceptions or validation directly upon assignment of invalid data, where your validation logic exists within your actual property setters, you can have a really nice and easy and elegant data validation model using our controls as well, because our controls will bubble up your message within the exception and show it gracefully until everything is corrected.
Infragistics. On the web at infragistics.com.